I would like to invite very fast Mr. Sinan Akkar, the Professor Dr. Sinan Akkar from TRAPT. He is the Director of Catastrophe Modeling and Data Analytics in TRAPT, and we are proud of them. Thank you.
Teşekkür ederim. Menekşe Hanım, thank you very much for your kind words. Dear colleagues, experts from insurance and reinsurance sector from all over the globe. I'll briefly describe you the elementary concepts in earthquake loss modeling, because essentially this is a heterogeneous group and one cannot go into the details of these technical issues. And in my speech, if I can be successful in delivering the fundamentals of what we are doing in earthquake loss modeling, I would feel myself, or I would I will think that I'm successful in this sense. I would comply with my mission here. All right. So in my presentation, firstly, I'm going to describe the meaning of earthquake loss modeling, and then right after that, I'm going to explain a bit of the use of earthquake loss modeling in insurance and reinsurance industry. And then I'll give you some specific examples about earthquake loss modeling outputs, and then I'll conclude my talk with some conclusive remarks. All right, in essence, any modeling, including earthquake loss modeling, will give you some quality information in terms of numbers for decision makers to make the social and to mitigate the social and economical impacts of a catastrophic event. So this is essentially what we are doing. We are trying to make quality predictions, estimations with justifications. And with that, because we are trying to make an estimate of future events, the entire topic is actually based on probability theory. Now, what do I mean with that? Take the example of earthquake loss modeling here. Now, you see, for earthquake losses, firstly, you have to make a good estimate of the location of the future events. And for that, you have to make good source modeling and the seismic source modeling, and eventually, by making use of the past events to estimate the future events, you do consider distributions of earthquakes, probabilistic distributions of earthquakes in terms of magnitude and location and so forth. And then, right after making such a, say, estimation, then you have to come up with probabilistic intensity distributions. You have to make an estimation about the intensity, the shake of the ground. And for that as well, you have to consider the distributions, the probability theory. And once you make an estimate of the intensity of the earthquake, then you have to find the loss inflicted by that earthquake. In other words, to find the damage, either structural damage, content damage, or financial damage, through the unknowns by considering the unknowns in building response, by considering the unknowns in non-structural component response, and so forth. So essentially, while making this quality or while coming up with this quality information, you need to make lots of different assumptions. You have to justify those assumptions. And then at the end, you have to give reliable, realistic as much as possible answers to decision makers. For example, Mr. Aliyev has mentioned about their new regulations about PMLs for ensuring the capacity of the insurance companies, and that PML is actually estimated or computed by the earthquake loss modeler, and the decision maker at least should have an idea about how it is calculated, under what assumptions it is found, computed. All right, so in all of my talks, every time I deliver a speech in front of people like you, a heterogeneous group of experts, I try to minimize the theoretical aspects of this problem. Now, to me, this is what I am doing, or my colleagues are doing. So essentially, this is the whole expression that we are trying to compute at the end. So, say that I have a risk and an earthquake occurred. So, that earthquake has a magnitude of m, and it shakes the ground. And essentially, that risk gets affected from that shaking effect. So, what I am doing is, I am considering the exceedance probability of losses for a specific ground motion intensity, and then I multiply that with the occurrence probability of that intensity. So two multiplications, only two multiplications. The occurrence probability of the shake intensity, the amplitude, and then the exceedance probability of loss due to that shake. But because I am trying to make it for the future event, and because I don't know anything about the likelihood of that amplitude of shakes, I have to consider a range. So that simple summation becomes very complicated in terms of unknowns. So in this simple expression, I have two important concepts or points. First one, the unknown intensity distribution, the ground motion intensity distribution, at the site of the risk. And then the vulnerability model, in other words, the damageability of your risk. It is not like under this value of PGA, PGV, it's going to take this amount of damage, that risk, the factory, the building, whatsoever. No, you have a lot of unknowns that you have to consider. So the damageability in terms of ground motion and the ground motion itself is expressed as distributions, and with that, that simple summation becomes really complicated. Why do we use earthquake loss modeling? I mean, this is my fourth year in this sector. Before that, I worked as an academician. Now, this is what I have learned during the 4 years to my experience. Firstly, you are using the earthquake loss modeling to rationalize the capacity need for reinsurance or insurance. You need numbers to rationalize your decisions about the capacity that you will be buying for the next year. So this could be achieved by considering critical scenarios to compute the top layers in CAD programs or proportional agreements. So this is what we call as scenario-based loss modeling. Or you can make use of stochastic earthquake catalogs, I'll come to that point, to represent the annual seismicity of the region that you are considering. And at the end, you come up with different levels of probabilities of loss exceedances. In your jargon, in your terminology, you say 250 years loss, 500 years loss, 1,000-year loss, or whatsoever. So the second, say, methodology provides you that kind of information. The first one is really like, what is the maximum loss against the most critical scenario that can ever happen to that risk? So you can choose those two, between those two, to give your decisions. The second say objective of earthquake loss modeling, or the use of earthquake loss modeling, to rationalize cash flow, profit loss, and operational planning after large earthquakes, which we lived in 23. So after the Kahramanmaraş earthquake sequences, the insurance companies, including TCIP as well, they needed to make a decision about their actions for cash flow, for example. So in that case, what an earthquake loss modeler does is sort of simulate that earthquake, that event, simulate the ground motion because of that event, and then compute the losses, and then give his or her results to the decision maker. Then the rest is justify those results and let the decision maker gives his decision or her decision. The third one is to rationalize policy premiums. If the premiums are high, low, the level of profits, and so forth. So again, for that, you have to give some long-term averages to the decision makers of loss, for the decision maker to come up with a premium decision, including its operational costs. So this is what we call as average annual loss ratio, or average annual loss. So that's also given by the earthquake loss modeler. And essentially, the last one could be to seek for non-traditional capacities over the traditional coverages. So what I'm referring to is parametric insurance. Now, it is a known fact that the traditional coverages are becoming more and more expensive, and in that case, the parametric insurance, coming up with a parametric modeling is at most important in the near future. So for this case as well, the earthquake loss modeling provides you some good level of information. Now, in the rest of my presentation, I'll go very fast. I know that the time is quite limited for the panel here. So I'm going to give one by one the cases from each one of these. So the first case is the event response. Event response is something we did performed successfully after the 23 Kahramanmaraş earthquake sequences. So we estimated the TCIP loss levels right after the earthquakes occurred. So we first modeled the earthquake, the twin duplet earthquakes, and then we considered the damageability, or the damage inflicted by those duplet earthquakes, by considering the overall effect of those two events to the insurance policies for TCIP, for example. And then afterwards, we come up with the distribution of loss for different exceedance probabilities. The first, recall that slide with that simple expression. That's what we did. Essentially, with that, we delivered our results to the TCIP management, and then with that results, including other side factors, they have organized the entire operation. The second case is scenario-based. Now, we're living in this city, and I mean, everybody knows that essentially this city will be hit by a big earthquake, a large event. I mean, this is a fact in X years later. And then for the decision maker again, we have to come up with the extent of the maximum loss possible for such an event, so that the decision maker can make the decisions, take actions before that. So we are sort of developing earthquake models or earthquake scenarios by considering different possibilities, and then come up with loss distributions for each case, and with that, we rationalize those loss distributions, we explain those loss distributions to the decision maker, and for them to take their decisions or actions for such a catastrophic event. And also, the parametric insurance. For those who are not familiar with this expression, parametric insurance actually provides immediate payouts of the insured losses, either for earthquakes exceeding a specific magnitude threshold, which occur in a predefined polygon. This could be a circle, a square, rectangle, whatsoever, or when the shake, the intensity of shake, exceeds a specific level. So essentially, you're making a sort of a smart prediction of a catastrophic event encapsulated or encompassed within a region with a specific magnitude, magnitude threshold, and then make an estimate of loss for that event. And this kind of information will eventually tell the decision maker about the use of taking that kind of non-traditional, say, insurance for his or her portfolio. So I gave an example here on the right. The insured loss is covered immediately. Say that we have an earthquake, the insured loss of magnitude greater than m, small m. The insured loss is covered immediately when the vibratory amplitude of the earthquake that occurs within the blue polygon exceeds, for example, 0.2 G. So whenever that level is exceeded, without any question, you just pay the loss. Now, there are very, technical, say, issues to handle that, like basis risk, morality, risk, and so forth. But, with a good detailed study, you can come over those. Now, this is something that, again, we completed in one of our projects. We came up with the occurrence probability of magnitude greater than 7 events on the Marmara faults, on the Marmara Sea faults. And with that, let me try to see if I can. Okay. So now what you are seeing here is that the occurrence probabilities of different large events, including background seismicity in the Marmara region for a 10,000-year catalog simulation. If you just assume that you take one instant of that, you run your analysis for losses of a given portfolio, you end up with the likelihood of losses for such a case. And essentially, the last example that I'm going to provide you is the stochastic catalog-based earthquake. Now, the critical point here is that you have to represent the overall seismicity of the entire region in a given area. So the two panels here on the left-hand side provide you some comparison of our catalog, which is the catalog given in the upper panel. So this is the historical catalog. You see this one is the historical catalog that occurred along the western part of Turkey, magnitudes 5 and above, that can really give damage to the portfolios. And then this is the simulated one for the same time period. Now, firstly, you have to see if you have to understand if these two catalogs overlap each other. In other words, my simulated catalog can represent the observed seismicity for that region, and then you do your loss calculations, and then essentially you provide the decision maker the EP curve, exceedance probability curve, so that he or she can read the losses for, say, 500 years, 250 years, 750 years, 1,000 years losses from those EP curves to make a decision for his for company's capacity. Now, that's it. Essentially, the topic itself is sort of complicated. But, I mean, and people like me, I'm sure that there are other colleagues in this room who work on this topic. We are to provide the decision makers quality information. On the other hand, the decision makers should have to understand at least the fundamentals, what is going on in that, in order not to misinterpret the results. This is something I faced most of the time after I joined the insurance and reinsurance industry in Turkey. If the decision maker has some fundamental information about how I am calculating my losses, then he or she will ask me quality questions, force me to answer those quality questions, which will help them to give better decisions for their risks or for their companies and so on. And also for that, people like me has to increase the capacity of the younger generation in this issue, on this type of, say, studies. And also, I'm trying to do it in TIRAP for the last 4 years. Thank you very much.